Yeah, it's pretty terrible. Now, I believe that this departure from our natural plan, master plan, it demonstrates both that as a state we've forgotten the promise of higher education, and more importantly, it demonstrates that we've forgotten how closely tied our education system is to our economy. Our community colleges especially are the engine of growth in California. And I don't believe it's any coincidence that in 2008, when we began spending more money on prisons than on higher education for the first time in California, our economy dropped from being the 6th largest in the world to being the 9th largest in the world, almost immediately. And now with the passage of Proposition 30, 1 year into it, we've already moved back up and retaken the 8th position. So I don't believe that necessarily implies causation, but it certainly shows that there's a correlation between the two. And it deserves a much more prominent position from the ruling elite. Just imagine if more than half of the money that is being generated from Prop 30 wasn't going into prison realignment and was actually being put into education, how much healthier our economy would be, and also how much healthier our education system would be. Now, I believe the biggest threat to education in the state is privatization. And in recent years, we've seen numerous efforts to privatize our colleges. Last year at Santa Monica College, there was a move to implement a 2-tiered system, which would charge some students more money than other students. And it actually resulted in students being pepper sprayed at the Board of Trustees meeting. That's how emotional the issue was. And then this year we have the passage of AB 955 in the very last days of the legislative session. Despite the almost unanimous opposition to it by every single college, except for one, in the state of California, despite thousands and thousands of phone calls, it passed with a supermajority of our state legislature, and it was signed by the governor. So it's just an instance where our voices were not heard. Now, it's very likely that if we don't do something to roll this back, the 500% increase in tuition that AB 955 put into place will be offered at a college near you pretty soon. And the community that is the test community for that, Long Beach, is the 5th most impoverished city in the country. So who is supposed to be able to pay for this? Now, not even our K-12 system is immune to these incursions to privatize. I just learned the other day that the state of California set aside $250 million to implement corporate high school partnerships. And they're essentially going to be privatizing 63 high school districts across the state of California in the next year. What I believe is even worse than all of this is the sometimes incestuous relationship between some college boards and the very foundations and nonprofits that are working towards privatizing education. And there are numerous examples of that. And only in America would we consider a nonprofit an entity that has over $2.5 billion in assets. I don't even, it doesn't compute. So I'm not going to mention any of these entities by name, but you can Google But one of them is the largest nonprofit foundation in the world. Another one is a lobbying firm that they actually wrote the Stand Your Ground law in Florida, and a similar law in Texas, and numerous other gems of legislation that have made it through our governments. California is quickly becoming ground zero for the efforts to privatize education, though. And I fear that we're turning our students into commodities. We are turning them into instruments of economic gain, numbers on a chart, and hardly anyone realizes it. That's the most disconcerting part of it. If you do research, you'll find the Student Success Act, which changes a community college's mission to pumping out as many degrees as they possibly can. MOOCs, an odd acronym, but massive open online courses, which are being offered at UC campuses, CSU campuses, and our community colleges, were both funded and bankrolled by these same nonprofit foundations that got them through our state legislature. Now, as a past community college trustee, I would say the most disconcerting part of all of this is that our meetings are empty. Our elections, no one votes. It's not uncommon for 1,000 people to determine the outcome of an election in a city of 500,000. So it's pretty awful. The cruelest irony of that, though, is that if you think about it, what affects our day-to-day lives more than our education system? I mean, it matters so much more than who gets elected to be president. I mean, it'll change the course of your life if you get a terrible education. And, yet the governance of those community colleges and all of our colleges is largely unnoticed. Unless we wake up, our education system will continue being watered down. Our kids will continue paying even more for a piece of stationery that has an ever-diminishing intrinsic value. The threat to privatize, however, it's still in its beginning stages here in California. And if we act now, we can easily roll it back. I just want to leave you with one quick anecdote, and then I'll get off the stage and out of your hair. But recently I was speaking with a librarian, the head librarian at UC Berkeley, and the largest archives for primary source documents for California history. And he was telling me that we've begun to have to offer translators for cursive to our incoming freshmen. Now, in order to get into Berkeley, you have to be the top student from the top high school, and you're attending the top college in the entire world, public college, and they don't know how to write cursive or read cursive. It just makes me wonder, what else have our children not been being taught? What else?